Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is episode 357 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I'm James, joined by Ryan and Paul on this Sunday morning. Guys, there's no Badgers this weekend, no Packers this weekend. How are we filling our time? Paul, what have you been up to?
Just making sure. Let's see. No, my wife won't listen to this. We've got a downstairs bathroom in this house that has never been used because when we moved in, it's a finished basement. I'm in it right now. You can see it, but it's small. It's kind of grungy. Only I like being down here, and it's carpeted wall to wall, including the bathroom.
Oh, that's right.
No, don't carpet your bathroom. I know that we've all learned this lesson as a society at this point, but I was like, it'd be nice to have that bathroom actually functioning. So I got some peel and stick tile. I'm ripping up the carpet, and I'm doing this all as a kind of surprise. So it needs a super deep clean too. I mean, you can deep clean stuff. That's not that hard. That's just chemicals and effort and time. And it's got like a shower in it. So I'm going to gussy that thing up and get it usable, and then we'll have an extra bathroom in the house. So that's what I'm doing this weekend with extra time on my hands, and going that and recruiting people over to Bluesky from Elon's hell site, which you should do if you haven't been over there yet. And there's a couple good starter packs for you out there too. Somebody, I think it was Zimborski or somebody like that, just posted an analytics baseball starter pack that is very, very good. I posted a Brewer one that's still very much in progress because there are not as many of you over there yet. But it's got like Curtin, JR, and us and anybody else I can find on it. So go do that because Twitter's bad, and Bluesky has now achieved the critical mass to make it an enjoyable experience.
Yeah, that starter pack stuff is a game changer in terms of just getting started. Like, that's always the struggle, right? Is figuring out who to follow and where everybody is. But Bluesky having that feature where it's literally just a list and you can just hit follow all. Or conversely, I've seen some ones on accounts that maybe you don't want to see, and you can just block everybody en masse right away too. Yeah.
And if you're looking for the baseball analytics one, it is Sky Kalkman. Go find him, and it's like the first post on there. Also, Jonathan, if you're listening, I can't add you to lists on Bluesky. I don't know if you have some cool security on your account. I see you're there. I see your account, but you cannot currently be added to starter packs. So just throwing that out there for you. Might be on purpose, and if it is, God bless you. But that is currently how you exist over there.
And also, I should mention, I started one for patrons. So if you are just hearing this now, we already got 24 people who put their handles in there, and I created a list, and it'll be linked in the show notes here, along with, I'll put the Brewers one in there, and we have actually a Bluesky thing that was referenced in today's show. So I'll throw all that into the show notes for this. But if you'd like to connect with the people who are patrons of this show on Bluesky, both this show and the reporting is eligible, then go ahead and do that as well. So right now it's 23. Well, Adam Post, yours didn't work. So if you're hearing this, Adam, yours didn't work for some reason. So I can't find you. So that's got to get fixed. I sent you a message, but yeah.
All right. Good reminders there. Please come join us. It's a lot of fun. No political ads or, nightmarish hellscapes. So join Bluesky. And for those of you who aren't patrons yet, go to patreon.com/MKE tailgate. You can help us out there. $2 a month. As always, guarantees you get your questions answered both here on Milwaukee's Tailgate and on reporting as eligible. The $5 level gets you that perk plus the additional exclusive content, the minor league extra with Ryan and Spencer, as well as Paul's reporting as eligible mini pods.
Ryan and Spencer will be recording a minor league extra on Wednesday night. So we've got that set up and ready to go. We will be talking a lot about the AFL. So be on the lookout. Once I get this show posted, I will put out a call for questions for that as well.
We do have a question about the Arizona Fall League coming up a little bit later. But first, let's start with the news of the week, because as we expected, not the second we hung up our call to record last week, but shortly thereafter, it felt like the thing that we were waiting for to happen, the big will they or won't they of the early offseason, the Brewers did decline their $10.5 million option on Devin Williams' contract. They do still have him for one more year of arbitration. So instead of paying him $10.5 million, they're going to take him to Arby and argue that he stinks because he missed half the year. And that'll be a huge blow up again that, we'll talk about a little bit more. For me, I feel like it just signals that they're going to try to trade him. But MLBTR estimates he'd get about $7.7 million in arbitration. So just jumping off that point, let's get to our first question of the week. It's Lucre Suitcase, who's asking, what's the likelihood that Devin Williams is a Milwaukee Brewer on opening day? And what should we expect as a return for him? Is the Hader deal a good comp minus Lamet and Rogers? So, Paul, we kind of talked about this for a couple of weeks now. This kind of seemed like the screw you, you're not coming back option, and they're trying to make him a more attractive trade asset, right?
Right. The only reason it's not zero is because nothing in baseball is ever zero. Maybe nobody will be interested in giving up anything worthwhile for him, but it's like as close to zero as anything can be, especially in the trade realm. Like if he's back, then they have screwed up. The Brewers have screwed up if he's back. He should be traded, given all the facts we know about this. And the Hader trade is probably a decent comp. The only reason I would say anything otherwise is I do feel like teams are being a little stingier with all of their trades for players, especially relief pitchers who are reaching the market value part of their careers. But yeah, I think that's a pretty good comp. But I doubt he's back. Like he really shouldn't be back. You can only piss off Devin Williams so many times before it becomes a very terrible idea to bring Devin Williams back. And we're way past that at this point.
Yeah, I think that it's incredibly likely that they actually do settle ahead of the arbitration hearing, that there's no need to fight at this point. Everybody knows where this is headed. Remember, after the big blow up with Corbin Burns, they ended up just settling on a number and the next time through and didn't go to arbitration a second time. It's sort of one of those things that you kind of go to the hearing once, and that's like that's what's needed to I don't know, sour the relationship or whatever. So I think that it's incredibly likely that he does just end up settling. I'm not sure the exact date on when numbers have to be exchanged. So, but I think it's probably likely that when they do trade him, there will be a firm number in place, and that there won't be the team that trades for him won't actually have to take him to arbitration. So, especially in these last years, what would the argument be over if it's 7.7 versus 8.7? Like, are they really going to have a huge knockdown drag out over like that amount when he's just already a year away from free agency? I think that's incredibly unlikely. So, moving on to
can I devil's advocate for a second?
Sure.
Once you burn the bridge, you may as well burn it all the way if you can save an extra $1 million. And I think that they might cynically look at this as a pretty good arbitration case, because while Devin Williams we know to be awesome by advanced metrics, the fact that he was injured cut into a lot of the metrics that matter in arbitration. So, as long as if they can save $1 million, they're going to save $1 million. And if they're not planning on bringing him back, then they might go that route. I think they really might. Like, they might torch the hell out of this.
Yeah, it's going to depend on it's going to depend on how close is he willing to get to the number they think the arbitrator is going to go with. Like, if they do get to the point of actually submitting numbers to each other, how close are, like, how good a chance do they think they have to win, and do they think it could go the other direction? It's just going to sort of depend on how close those numbers are to each other and what the settle point that like Williams is willing to accept is, right?
Yes, there is but I really think that number is just about like a very small amount where the fighting is not worth the cost of the fighting. And I think it's a pretty small amount. Like, I don't know. We'll see. I could be wrong here, but once they torch the relationship, I think that they will like always remember the ARB belt. Like that is that is how front office think about these things. Like
Matt Arnold has a title to defend with his Executive of the Year, right?
Yeah, and I know I've talked about this before, but we once had a baseball prospectus event where one of their in-house counsel was there and was asked about this process and said, sometimes it's like $75,000, but that $75,000 becomes the basis for the next arbitration hearing, and then it compounds into $150,000, then it compounds into $300,000, but a few years later we're suddenly in the millions, and so every five-digit number becomes a 6-digit, 7-digit number very quickly, and so they fight tooth and nail over this stuff. So I won't be surprised if they drag out Devin Williams like a ton.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the precedents are and all of that. With the Corbin Burns thing, we had a pretty good idea of what that was because we had such a good comp. Remember, it was like the
Shane Bieber was.
It was Bieber, yeah. The Shane Bieber comp was actually it was so a 1-for-1 comp that you could just be like, yeah, these guys are so comparable that when Bieber settled where he did, the Brewers were basically like, well, that's your number. You're not going to get more than that. We're going to make the case for that number. And Burns and his then agent, not his now agent, that was before he had Scott Boras, basically said, yeah, well, okay, we're going to fight for more. And they lost. And yeah, we'll see if the agent, how realistic is the agent and how willing is the agent to just be like, this is what's going to happen in this hearing. Right. And like, what is worth fighting for here and what is not worth fighting for and all of that. So we'll see. But as for the return part of this, I was thinking about this, and it's an interesting thing because is the Hader deal a good comp minus Lamet and Rogers? Maybe. It's probably not a bad comp, but I would say that there's a couple of confounding factors here. One, I guess you could say that Devin Williams' value is a little bit depressed because he's coming off the injury, and I don't know if I don't honestly think teams are going to care about the fact that he gave up that home run to Pete Alonso, like in terms of their trade calculation, like that's going to matter. I know it matters a lot to fans, but I don't think that's going to matter to teams making the trade.
Might matter in arbitration. Yeah.
I don't know if it, I think there's a thing in arbitration that you it's a regular season.
Postseason.
Yeah. Okay. I think it's just strictly regular season. I don't think you can use postseason. So anyway, but the injury thing is definitely germane there. Anyways, Hader's value was pretty depressed when the Brewers traded him because he had been terrible for a month, and there were all these questions about like how good his stuff actually was at that point and what was going on with him. And so Hader was traded at a moment of depression. That's why it was the Padres that traded for him, because they weren't as acutely aware of those things as many teams would have been. So that's why it was the Padres. But there's also the factor that our impression of the Hader trade at the time it happened was colored by the fact that Esther Ruiz and Robert Gasser, sorry, it's been a while since we've said his name out loud, apparently, that those guys were ascendant. Their prospect status had taken off a bunch during that year. Their prospect status had risen, but it wasn't really reflected in the rankings. So when people saw those rankings, they were like, they got the what ranked prospect in the Padres system for this guy.
Right.
And that's going to be less of a factor in the offseason because it's prospect ranking season, right? So we're going to get more up to date there. I think there's going to be less difference between like what the prospect's value really is and what the prospect's perceived value is because of the public lists, if that makes sense. So I think there's also that to take into account, that just there's a perception difference here. But I honestly think it's not a bad comp in terms of like overall value of what you could expect to get for 1 year of a relief pitcher. I mean, yes, he's a dominant, great relief pitcher, but it is still 1 year of a 1-inning relief pitcher, right?
Yep.
Ryan, question for you. Do the Padres have any prospects left? Because we know they love trading their top prospects for relief pitchers. Just this last year, they sent Dylan Lesko to Tampa with a couple others for Jason Adam. They sent a whole bunch, like what, Robbie Snelling and Graham Pauley to Florida or Miami for Tanner Scott. So like they love trading top high end prospects for relief pitchers. Do they have any left we can steal?
Yeah, well, okay, they definitely have some left. Ethan Salas and Leo Dallas DeVries. I always have trouble saying that name. Actually, that might be the first time I've tried to say it out loud. Are both top flight prospects, and Leo DeVries is actually in the AFL. He's playing on the team with the Brewers because they happen to be on the same team.
Interesting.
Yeah, so the Peoria Javelinos, we have a question coming up about that. They do, but those guys wouldn't be traded for Devin Williams.
No.
Those guys are a different level of prospect. The Padres have prospects because the Padres always have prospects. It's what they have is the ability to, what Preller is really good at is getting prospects who are going to shine on their way up through the minor leagues. When they get to the majors, there's a lot of underperformers in that group.
Sure.
But what he shines at is getting guys who are going to make the prospect rankers really salivate and really love them. That's what he's really, really good at. And that's how he got that job in the first place. Frankly, he's an example of the Peter principle, which I've talked about before. Yeah, maybe it would be the Padres, but I don't know. It could be lots of teams, I suppose.
I'm just looking for a sucker. That's all.
Yeah, that's
all right.
Well, that's what you got to get when you're trying to deal a relief pitcher. You got to find a sucker.
All right. I guess also as expected this last week, the Brewers did make a qualifying offer to free agent Willy Adames. That was a no-brainer. He has until November 19th to decide if he wants to accept the $21 million in change offer for 1 year or become a free agent. I think we all assume he's going to decline the qualifying offer. So if or when that happens, the Brewers will receive a draft pick at the end of the first round, as long as his eventual contract ends up being for more than $50 million, which also seems like a safe bet since he seems to be profiled as maybe the second best bat on the free agent market this offseason. The pickings are kind of slim out there.
MLBTR did say that their prediction on it was 6 years, 160. Which seems maybe a little rich, but it's way, way higher than that qualifying offer amount that they would need. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So I guess the other interesting tidbit was he was actually interviewed, I think, at The Athletic this last week, and Will Salmon and Katie Wu said not only is he willing to move off shortstop for the right fit, he also said that he's willing to stay in Milwaukee for less money, but he also wants to be fair for what he deserves in his career and what he's done. So, that's sort of like the lip service we hear from every free agent, right? That wants to stay in the good graces and maybe not cross a contender off the list when it comes to that contract. But Paul, he's basically just saying that, right? Like he's not going to come back for a super team friendly deal when he's in line for $160 million.
Yeah, I don't think there's any chance that happens. And if you need any more evidence that it's not going to happen, Jim Bowden tweeted that it might happen this morning. So you can just cross that off the list. But the main reasons there are definitely players that the Brewers might entertain, kind of reaching out for on those kind of sentiments in certain circumstances. But I don't think Willie's that kind of player. And part of the big deal is, we've mentioned this before many times, is he becomes quite a bit less valuable, A, if he moves off shortstop, and B, kind of even if he stays on shortstop and doesn't come back to where he was defensively when he was a younger man, which is very unlikely. I suspect that, the Brewers are not going to say anything other than, we love Willie, we'd love to have him back because he's a great clubhouse guy and a great guy by all accounts. But I suspect they're pretty happy to not pay this money and to be done with Willie, because looking forward, he is likely to be quite a bit less valuable. And if you move him to third base, it's very easy to envision that bat not playing super well very quickly. And who knows how he's even going to hold down over there. So this is lip service stuff. The Brewers do not have extra money to spend this offseason the way that cable packages are in so much flux. They're not going to do anything out of the ordinary. They're not going to reach for guys who I suspect they see as on the downside of their careers. And yeah, this is all fun and lip service, and we all wish Willie the best, and he's awesome. But he's not coming back for a team-friendly deal. And he wouldn't take like based on what he's projected to get, it would have to be a really team-friendly deal, like a ridiculously low team-friendly deal. Not happening. This is, all nice to say, but not happening at all.
And he shouldn't, right? Like, go get your
go
get your money.
Go get your bag. Yeah.
Go get your bag. Exactly. Like, he should do that. And, God bless him. Go get the Dodgers to hand you a huge pile of money and have fun. Like, this is a really, it's tough to say. It's a really good time to get out of the Willy Adames market, because the defensive collapse that we saw this year, which he probably is going to, if he's smart, and he is a smart guy, so he's spending this winter, I'm sure, working on shoring up the defensive side of things and making sure that he's going to have a better defensive year next year. So I would expect a rebound from this, really bad fall off he had this year. But that indicator, the fact that it happened and that it was so steep, that it was so dramatic, is a preview of coming attractions. And we've talked a lot in past episodes, and Paul just kind of referenced it too, that the way the bat profiles is just, it's kind of a lot of power, and there is discipline there. It's power and discipline. And then not a lot of contact. There's some serious contact issues there. And that is a classic, what we called in, analytics 1.0 era. That is a old man profile. That's an old player skill. That's an old batter profile. And that tends to age poorly. When guys adopt that profile young, it tends to signal that maybe the end phase of their career is going to play out poorly. It's one thing when a guy does that at 35, right? When that's kind of the last thing that they have left. They've got discipline and they've got the ability to hit for power. But when it's happening to you at 29, when you're already sort of at that point, and frankly, even before that, Willy Adames has largely been this profile. It's old man skills, and so it sends off a lot of red flags. And so this is probably a very good time to get out of the Willy Adames business from strictly a do you want to pay for production or do you want to pay for past production standpoint, right? So It's hard. It sucks because he seems like such a great guy and such a key part of the clubhouse, but it's tough business, man.
Yeah, defensively too. I think the third base thing is interesting to me because obviously it's something that our patrons have floated a couple of times before. I don't know if it's just like, hey, New York Mets, I know we're not moving Lindor off short, so consider Willie at third if you want, or Dodgers, you don't really have to move Mookie back to the infield if you don't want to, but also it's just that defensive slip at shortstop is really hard to ignore. And I've seen some stuff written about how, his agents could maybe spin it as a bulk of the errors that did happen this year, the errors he was credited with, at least, happened in the span of a week or two. So was it just a really bad stretch? But also, we've been looking at the defensive metrics. I remember still early in the season when, the DRP or RDA numbers for Prospectus came out, and we were like, these look way wrong, right? And they just never resurfaced, and he ended the year in the negatives in DRP. So it's hard to ignore that. And I know a lot of teams probably have their own metrics that are similar to that it's hard to ignore. All right. Let's go beyond Willy Adames, shall we? There were a number of other more minor moves that the Brewers made. So Colin Ray officially cleared waivers. His option was declined, and he's a free agent now. So let's just kind of go down the list. Any chance Colin Ray, Paul, ends up in Milwaukee on a smaller deal? Or is it sort of like I kind of referenced last week? The Brewers think they can make Colin Rays left and right?
I think that's correct. And I was actually kind of surprised Colin Ray cleared. But because that deal doesn't seem bad, but that tells you a lot about the availability of Colin Rays generally. It also probably tells you something about what other teams think of pitchers leaving the Brewers for other teams, which is both a nice compliment and also, not great for the Colin Rays of the world. I don't think he'll be back. I do think he'll get a decent innings eating deal elsewhere, and I don't think that they'll pay him anything. I think the Brewers can pay those guys something close to the minimum. and that they think they can, and whether they're right or wrong, that's what they're going to do. And I think they're probably right. They've done this plenty of times now. So I don't think he'll be back. I'd be a little hacked off about the option. The only reason I would possibly go back is if the Brewers were like the highest bidder amongst the very low amount of bidders that he has for his services. But I think he's probably gone. But I was surprised. Like, I'd have given Colin Rea $5 million to pitch for me. So that's why I'm not in charge of a baseball organization, probably. But I don't think he's back. No.
Yeah, there's probably a price, right, where it would be, but I still think somebody else is probably going to be willing to give him more than what the Brewers are willing to give him. And they probably justifiably feel here that they can create Colin Reas out of kind of a lot of different players, and they, I'm sure, have a long, extensive list of players they would like to get their hands on and see what they can do with them this winter, and that's what they're going to focus on. But there's also value. I think Colin Rea fit in. I feel like he was a good fit for the organization, and like just kind of he seemed to be very, very good at like executing a game plan, right? Like it was very clear what Colin Rea had these limitations, and he was not going to blow people away, and that he needed to make sure that he was playing into what the defense could defend, and he just was really good at executing that game plan for the most part. And I think there's value in that, and I think they would value that as well. So I think there's a price. I'm going to say somebody else probably pays him more because there's, 29 other teams out there, but I think it's possible that he does come back. And didn't he? Yeah. Didn't we just do this dance last offseason? Isn't that what happened last year? They let him go and then he came back, or?
Man, I don't remember. I don't think I cared about Colin Rea yet last year.
Were they non-tendered him or something?
No,
like that?
It was because part of his contract required that he could become a free agent because he was coming back from Asia where he had been pitching. And so even though he hadn't reached the 6 years of control, his contract when the Brewers signed him coming back was that he could do that. And he ended up signing back here anyways. So
yep.
It's possible. I was just looking at COTS, and unfortunately I can't find him on COTS now because they're very good at scrubbing. As soon as a player is like leaves an organization, they take him off of the thing. So I couldn't find where Colin Rea was to confirm all that. But according to my memory, he was a free agent last year and they brought him back. So
yeah, he did hit free agency, and they signed him to that contract, according to Adam McKelvey, hours after he became a free agent. So they very quickly brought him back.
Yeah.
All right. Likewise, in the rotation, we kind of talked about this for the last couple of weeks. Frankie Montas turned down his end of the $20 million mutual option. Part of me is surprised he turned down $20 million, but as we kind of talked about, he might be able to get something close to that, at least over multiple seasons. So, Paul, he's also gone, right? We've seen the last of him.
Oh, yeah, he's definitely gone. And this strikes me as a you can't fire me, I'm firing you situation more than anything else, because the Brewers weren't going to do that, I don't think. And so you may as well be like, I can get more, like, set yourself up, frame yourself as I'm better than this. And, kudos to Frankie, who had a pretty good run with his very short stint as a Brewer and maybe got himself back into payable shape by doing so. But yes, he is going to, even if he doesn't get 20, he's going to get more than the Brewers will pay Frankie Montas by a healthy margin. So, yeah, he's definitely gone. No question.
Yeah, and there were some indicators with Montas. Like, yes, the thing that you salivate over, obviously, is the fact that he was striking out 11 per 9 when he was with the Brewers. He was also walking 4 per 9 and giving up 1.6 home runs per 9. Those
a lot of home runs.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of home runs. And an overall ERA, like, and granted, this is kind of mostly from it was 1 or 2 bad starts where it really inflated his numbers, but a 4.55 ERA. So, like, his ERA plus was a 92. He was, 8% worse than the park adjusted league average last year, even with the Brewers, even with the improvement. So, yeah, it's intriguing. Montas is intriguing, and especially the fact that the stuff was so much better down the stretch with the Brewers than it was before that. And obviously starters who are out there throwing 98 mile an hour sinkers, that gets your attention in a hurry. But he's not coming back.
Yeah, you know what I don't like about Montez more than anything is he throws he still has good miles per hour on his pitches, but they just don't seem to move at all. And it really is put in stark contrast by watching every other Brewer pitcher and then Montez come in, because one thing the Brewers pitchers do excel at is just generating spin, having a lot of movement, horizontal and vertical on all their pitches. And I was just going to Savant to make sure I'm not a crazy person, because the eyes can lie to you. But no, that is true. His movement has actually been tapering off over the course of his career. It's probably why he has declined a little bit, and it really sticks out. Like, that is a straight fastball. It is a very, very fast, but very straight fastball. And if it doesn't get better in Milwaukee, it's probably not going to get better anywhere else either.
Totally fair point. Brewers also outrighted Bryce Wilson and Jake Bauers. They both took free agency. Jake Bauers, I don't think is too much of a surprise that they outrighted him. They took a flyer on a former top prospect and got what we kind of all expected. Could have become a postseason hero if things had broken differently, but they didn't. Bryce Wilson is one where, Paul, you were gone last week, but we kind of talked about, Colin Ray being gone. Is Bryce Wilson the next Colin Ray, where he could step in and be a serviceable starter with unimpressive stuff? And then they just said no and got rid of him. So I know you're not the world's biggest Bryce Wilson fan, Paul,
Nope.
But any surprise there? Yeah,
not really. And they're probably looking at what we look at. Like, Bryce Wilson, to his credit, outperformed his peripherals quite a bit and pretty reliably. And, sometimes there is something there with those guys. Like, there are Wade Mileys in this world who are able to do that over the long haul. But I don't think the Brewers probably trust Bryce Wilson to do that over the long haul. And when roster spots come to a crunch, they will always pick better peripherals over less good peripherals. And that's probably what got Bryce. So there's probably a number on Bryce, because I do think he can do some innings eater type work, even if it's middle relief. But I think he's probably gone.
Yeah, as we talked about last week, and this was my fault. I'm the one that made that case, and so I wasted everybody's time with that. I do apologize for that, because right away it was wrong. Like, that was
literally right away. Like, they literally outrighted him as soon as we were done.
Yeah, it was before that podcast came out. It was like everything that I had said about Bryce Wilson was already dead and buried. Anyways, yeah, the thing with Bryce Wilson, again, is you don't have the roster flexibility with him, because he came to the Brewers. One of the reasons the Brewers got him was he was out of options. And so he's been on the Brewers the last 2 years, and it's kind of amazing that he stuck there as long as he did. I guess it's a testament to the fact that his run prevention overall was just so much better than his peripherals that he was able to stick it out. But the fact that he didn't have options it makes it very difficult, the way the Brewers, and frankly, the way most reasonably smart teams handle their business now. Not having options when you are sort of a fringe roster guy makes it almost impossible to work around. It just makes it very difficult. He had some trips to the IL that may have been phantom. I don't know.
Because of that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, he may have, they may have been using the phantom with him. So yeah, it's just one of those things.
Last couple of minor moves. Rob Zastryzny claimed off waivers by the Cubs. Kevin Herget claimed off waivers by the Mets. Couple of, real part-time pieces in the bullpen. I don't know if we're going to miss either one of them. I think Zastryzny was originally with the Cubs, right? So that could, have some history there. Kind of interesting that the Cubs with Counsell took one and David Stearns and the Mets took the other. But Paul, anything notable beyond that?
No, not really.
Yeah.
I recall sort of liking Zastryzny. I'm glad I don't have to learn how to pronounce his name correctly anymore. That's good. But, they're just guys. This is just other organization spaghetti. Kevin Herget really did not impress me at all. Maybe they can turn him into something decent, but I don't think there's a secret Devin Williams amongst the duo, so I don't care.
Yeah, these are pretty fringy roster guys. Obviously, the potential to annoy is much more for the guy who's going to be on the Cubs. And I think he also he has better upside also. So that's why I asked the question, who could be more annoying? And it's the guy who's on the Cubs, because you could see him come in and be a pain in the butt against the Brewers in this coming season. But yes, it is interesting that these guys who were interesting to the Brewers are interesting to the Cubs and to the Mets.
Yep.
It's funny how much all of our guys just kind of bounce around. You like the Aaron Savali experience, he was interesting to Cleveland. He was interesting to Tampa. He was interesting to the Brewers.
Right.
These pitchers bounce around the same sorts of organizations. And, it's kind of a good indicator that there's something there when you get a guy. And frankly, remember, like, it's the thing that should have given us a little bit more of a clue and made us a little bit more positive earlier than we were on Tobias Myers, because you look at the organizations he was with, and again, it's Cleveland, it's Tampa, it's San Francisco before they decided to make themselves dumb for some reason. It's those organizations is where Tobias Myers was interesting to all those teams. So the fact that he wound up on the Brewers and ended up becoming better than people necessarily expected, we probably should have seen that coming a little bit more than we did, just because of that simple fact of who was interested in him.
Absolutely.
Yep.
All right. Moving on, the other bit of news in the last week, the Brewers won not one but 2 Gold Gloves. So I don't know how I expected that voting to go, but Bryce Terang and Sal Frelick both won Gold Glove awards. Bryce Terang also took home the National League's Platinum Glove. So that one, I think, likewise with the Gold Gloves, some metrics, but also a fan vote. So I'm just wondering how, Brewers fans and fan votes, we love to stuff the ballot box there. So I wonder how much that played a role. But Paul, anything noticeable there, or is it just kind of a nice thing to hang your hat on?
A couple things. So first of all, I do think it's worth noting how far the Gold Glove has come from an award that used to just be about who the best hitter was, who didn't completely embarrass themselves, or in some cases did, and people just chose not to notice. Derek Jeter, of course. And because Bryce Terang and Sal Frelick, not great offensive players. So that's at least, I think, worth noting, that we're actually paying attention to actual defensive chops instead of what we used to do. That's probably an improvement. Second, I did not know that the Platinum Glove existed. It has apparently existed for some time, but it's probably a good pick, fan voting notwithstanding, because Terang, by a lot of the WAR, or at least one of the WAR calculations, was really, really high, like 5+. I can't remember which one. And that is almost entirely defensive value. Terang wasn't a terrible hitter, but a lot of his value came from speed and then defense. And I'm not sure there's another player out there that generated that level of value without the bat being the primary version of it. So all for that. But all of that said, you can't get me to care about Gold Glove awards. They are the Grammys of baseball, and I don't give a crap at all.
Yeah, I would echo all that. It is interesting, and it is true to say that they've gotten better. They're not as bad as they used to be, but they are still not the greatest and most meaningful thing in the world. And yeah, if you want actual like good ones, Fielding Bible Awards are, I think a much more rigorous process, and you're more likely to end up. But again, Terang and Frelick getting the awards does kind of show that it's, you can do it without the bat. So it's at least positive movement.
We do have a Patreon question about the Gold Gloves, more specifically Bryce Terang. So Mark Podscarby asking this week, Bryce Terang just won his first Gold Glove and first Platinum Glove at the age of 24. I'm getting way ahead here, but what are the chances he ties or breaks the Brewers' all-time Gold Glove record held by George Scott of 5? And if he does that, would he have a realistic shot at the Hall of Fame? I don't think so, but Paul, what do you think? Could he at least get to 5?
So I think it's going to be tough for him to get to 5, just because the offensive profile for Terang is not likely. Like, he's been good, he's still young, but it's hard to maintain consistent playing time over the long haul with the Terang offensive profile. It's not impossible. And it's even possible he can still develop a little bit offensively, which would be lovely if it happens. But George Scott was real good, and that helps you get Gold Gloves just by virtue of being the guy who's out there all the time. Like, even if Bryce Terang doesn't like completely fall off a cliff, it's easy to imagine him 2 or 3 years down the line turning into like a platoon player or some, a defensive star who comes out at some point in games. So I just don't think that is very, very likely. And I also did want to give a shout out to Blake Perkins, who was actually the best defensive outfielder on the Brewers, but didn't win a Gold Glove. And, also a reason we shouldn't pay attention to the Gold Glove anymore.
Yeah, though that is mostly because he was in center field where the competition is higher, right?
Yeah.
And Frelick
Sal Frelick is a center fielder playing right field. That is absolutely true. But Perkins was, it was close, I know, but I think the best center fielder in the league.
Yeah, it is a little bit weird once they decided, what was that now? It's been a while, like maybe 5-10 years ago, where they decided we're not just going to do outfield, we're going to do right field, center field, left field.
That's how Yelly got that nom, right? I mean, left fielders
exactly.
Well, yeah, and also just because the way it was working is every year you'd have 3 center fielders be the Gold Glove outfielders. And in one respect, okay, that's it. Basically, the way it ended up working out was it made it impossible for almost anybody else. I think there maybe were like Brett Gardner or who was the left fielder for the Royals in that? Alex Gordon. I think those guys may have snuck in that era, but it usually just made it like, no, you have to be a center fielder to win a Gold Glove in the outfield. But then again, like those are the best outfielders. That's why they're in center field.
Yeah.
Not wrong. Yeah.
It's not wrong. It's that the best guys are going to be in center field for the most part. So yeah. But yeah, Paul was saying that he would be not surprised if he ended up falling into a platoon like 2-3 years down the road. I wouldn't be surprised if it happened next year because just the ups and downs of that kind of profile where you're not, he's relying on balls to fall in for him not to be a really bad offensive player, right? Like he is relying on getting a reasonably high BABIP, which he has done things to make his BABIP high. I'm not saying that this is all luck. I'm not making a complete luck case here for Terang because he's done some things to be able to exploit open parts of the field. Like that is part of what he's doing.
Slapping it to left field, right? Like, but if they stop shifting him like a lefty, that goes away pretty quick.
Yeah, or just in general, if balls don't fall, if he's not having that, if he's having bad hit luck for a while, it's going to be bad. I mean, the offense, because there isn't really any power there to fall back on. So his offensive game is very dependent on balls falling in. And so, yeah, he's a guy who is going to sometimes not be playable or not be a guy that you want out there every single day offensively, but the defense is the thing that is going to prop him up. So, yeah. And no, I mean, he would have to transform himself completely as an offensive player to get anywhere near the types of levels you have to get to the Hall of Fame.
I don't know. Just like 10 more Baseball Reference 5-WAR seasons, and he's in the conversation.
Yep.
All right. Let's get to other questions this week. Jay Google asking on Patreon, any thoughts from the Arizona Fall League so far? Also interesting that the crew is cutting bait with the players with no options like Wilson, right? We kind of covered that one, but Ryan, you mentioned you had your eye on the AFL. So what have you seen so far?
Yeah, I don't want to go too deep into this because this is going to be a main point of what Spencer and I talk about on the Minor League Extra on Wednesday, but just to kind of give an update as to what's going on here. You have both Juan Baez and Luis Lara Baez is having a legitimately 933 OPS. He's hitting really well. 324, 418, 515. He was in the Fall Stars game, which was on last night. He played in that. He's hitting for some pop and he's showing some defensive abilities. He's mostly playing second base from what I've seen, but yeah, so Baez has been impressive. Lara has been fine. 274, 372, 356. Lara's been fine, but again, the questions about impacting the ball are still there. And the Arizona Fall League is built to impact the ball. That's kind of what it's there for, is like go in and slug. On the downside, we really are having we're gonna have to do a major reassessment of where Brock Wilkins stands, because 162, 261, 297 is where he's at. He did put on a show. He was in the home run derby for the Fall Stars game because that's what he does. And he put on a show. He hit 14 in the first round, but that was kind of it. And the level of contact is, 29 strikeouts and 74 at bats in the Arizona Fall League, where the the competition, the level of the pitching, hoo boy. So yeah, I definitely at this point would not plan on, Spencer and I kind of talked on the last minor league extra about, is there anything Brock Wilkin can do to raise his profile for you in the fall league? And we both kind of said, it's all going to, even if he comes out and just is absolutely awesome, it's going to all have to be taken with a big grain of salt because of the offensive environment there.
Sure.
But if he struggles, that is going to get our attention. And I think, obviously at this point it's almost over. The league is almost done. And this is sort of a worst case scenario. He has struggled a lot, and it's really going to hurt his prospect status a lot.
I know Spencer and others have stressed, looking at how much he struggled at AA in Biloxi, but noting that has a suppressed offensive environment. Mm-hmm. But I can definitely see how if that continued into Arizona with the sky high, offensive numbers, that's concerning. But we'll tune into the minor league extra this week for more on that.
Yeah.
All right, JVT asking first this week, where do the Brewers stand at this point in the offseason in relation to $25 available compared to last season, positional player needs, and pitching needs? And if you were able to make one safe offseason prediction and one surprising offseason prediction, what would you predict? So I guess, Paul, let's start with the money question. How do you feel that's going? What are they working with? I know you mentioned earlier that the TV situation really throws a big wrench into this.
Yeah, I think they're going to be pretty cheap. And I know they have a reputation for being cheap, but they will occasionally go out and make splashes. Like Rhys Hoskins was a splash. Like they actually signed one of the better players available at the position last year, even though he didn't work out. He was a gamble, etc. I think that they're going to be extremely cheap this year because the RSN system and the cable money is just not reliable. It's when organizations take any kind of hit or just have uncertainty about money coming in, they often react by going into a shell a little bit. And the Brewers, I think, will do that because they're also very confident in their ability to generate, especially pitching and defense value from what they have internally. So I think that this will be an extremely tight offseason. I don't think there'll be anything even like a Rhys Hoskins. And so it makes kind of the subsequent questions somewhat difficult to answer because positional player need wise, they need to add pop, especially with Adames probably out the door. And I'm not sure where they're going to get that from. That maybe I'll be proven to be wrong and they'll go get Rhys Hoskins part 2, which hopefully works out better. But I just think that they're going to, like, the payroll this year, I will predict will be quite a bit less than it was last year. And for probably the next couple, at least until this all gets kind of worked out.
Yeah. So right now, I'm looking at Cott's baseball contracts, and they have the Brewers at $108.3 million projected going into next year. And that's for an opening day payroll. Now, remember the way that works out for like the competitive the competitive balance tax 40 man is actually 135. And that has them listed as 20th in baseball. On both of those numbers, they're listed at 20th. So they already have spent, I think, a big chunk of the money they're going to spend. We've talked about that in past episodes here, that they've already been spending. And some of this is just money that's locked in, and they're kind of stuck with it now. So I think Paul is probably right about that. I think that they are probably going to be looking for opportunities, things that come by value-wise, but it's an uncertain market in terms of what the financial situation for the team is going to be. So in terms of positional player needs, though, because he was asking about that too, in terms of positional player needs, I think they're pretty well set across the board. Except I think you want one more infielder who can start, right? Like I think that's probably what they're going to be looking for, is one more infielder who is capable of starting. And that could be at a couple different positions, but we have more coming up about that later. Pitching needs, I mean, they need to keep adding depth. They need to do what they always do with pitching, which is to just keep adding depth and to keep adding possibilities, guys they could potentially contribute and help them out. And so that's what they're going to do. They're going to add guys that they see upside and can do can make positive things. So my safe offseason prediction is, I don't see any. I would be surprised if anybody got more than one guaranteed year in terms of free agent signings. Like, I think you'll see 1 year signings. I think that's what you're going to get here is 1 year signings. I don't think they're going to give out multi-year contracts to anybody. And one surprising offseason prediction, I mean, like specifically, I don't know, but there's definitely going to be a trade that takes us all by surprise. There's definitely going to be a trade, and it's not going to be the Devin Williams trade. Maybe the return will be like, whoa, they got him? How did they get him? But I think there's going to be a trade. Somebody is going to get traded away that is going to surprise us because, frankly, they usually do that. That's kind of how they operate. So I think we're going to have that happen at some point.
Paul, what are your offseason predictions? What do you think?
I guess my boring offseason prediction is that they will not make any big splash signings in any way, shape, or form just because of the money problem that they currently have. But I do think that they'll probably go and grab a relatively cheap spaghetti at the wall power bat of some kind. It's hard to actually. If you go look, one of the funny things, this seems to happen every year actually, but if you go look at the free agent list, a lot of the people at the very bottom of the free agent official MLB.com free agent list are people who have been on the Brewers before with a lot of reliability. Like the catchers are the bottom three of the bottom five are Martin Maldonado, Omar Narvaez, and Luke Molly. The two bottom first basemen are Rowdy Tellez and G-Man Choi, who have both been with the Brewers at various points. Like, this happens a lot. So I don't know anything about Yuli Gurriel, but he's third on the first baseman list, and he is 41 and sucks. But I'll just say they'll have him in camp because that would be surprising and would keep this kind of trend going on how this list works out. Really quick on third baseman, it's Luis Urias, Jace Peterson, and Brian Anderson are the bottom three. It's very consistent. So,
oh my God. All right, Andrew asks our next question. Do you think there's more of an opportunity to sign or trade for a short-term solution at shortstop instead of looking one at third base? So I guess, Paul, while you got that list up, what former Brewers at shortstop are available?
Shortstop, not as many. It's just Willie, and he's at the top.
Okay.
I do have the list up though, and it's Jose Iglesias, Paul DeYoung, Kevin Newman, Ahmed Rosario, Nick Ahmed, guys. That Brendan Crawford is 38 and on there. I think one of the guys on the team ends up playing shortstop. Personally, I would guess Ortiz.
Yeah.
So that's what I think happens there. And just looking at the list, I don't give old men who play shortstop any kind of money at all, and that's what all of these are. So that's why I think that happens. Third baseman, you can at least get either a lumbering guy or a shortstop to play great defense over there. It's easier to fill third base. You can either get good defense or a bat, and that's probably what they'll do. But yeah, all the shortstops after Willie are pretty underwhelming. So don't do that.
Yeah, I think they probably lean towards getting third base because it's easier to find power at third base.
Yep.
And they already have Ortiz at short who can play short at we think a pretty high level defensively. So I think they're going to be looking for pop to replace Willie's pop that is going to be absent.
Yep.
And so I think third base makes a lot more sense, but never. One of the things they do have is they have some flexibility here where they can, if what is available to them is the shortstop, and that's what makes more sense. They can just leave Ortiz over there and run with, whoever at shortstop. In that case, it's probably a trade, though, more so than a free agent signing. I think what we're really hoping for, if you want an ideal world situation, what you should really hope for is that a good third baseman who's young, who has some pop, is available in trade for Devin Williams. That would sort of be the ideal situation.
We could sucker the Rockies into giving us Ryan McMahon for Devin Williams. That'd be fun.
Yeah,
Let's do that.
McMahon is owed $16 million next year.
I know. They'll get the Rockies to throw in some cash. They're dumb. They'll do it. I was hoping. I'm just trying to get our weekly Ryan McMahon reference in here now at this point. Michael Parr, our next question, asking who's the best third outfielder in on the Brewers, and why is it Garrett Mitchell? Will he ever play a full season healthy? I don't know about that, Paul. What do you think?
No, it's play. Well, it's hard to say who's the third out, or who's the. I think it's Perkins. So Churrio's one, right?
Churrio's one. I think Yelich is two until further.
That's
notice.
The thing. Yeah, I think Yelich is two, but I get the point there. So I think it's Perkins because he's the best defensive player, and he's not even atrocious on offense. Mitchell is good and maybe better he's better at offense than Perkins is for sure. I think he's slightly worse defensively, but also he's got to be able to stay on the field. And yes, he finished strong, but he didn't start on the field because he's Garrett Mitchell. So Perkins is very, very good. He's very reliable. He's awesome defensively. He's the third best. Mitchell is fourth until he can be out there for 3/4 of a season.
Yeah, and then there's the questions about Garrett Mitchell. When are they going to? Spencer and Jack always talk about this. I'm just going to crib right from them. When are teams going to start just pounding him with fastballs high and away? Like, when is that going to happen? Because he has a hole there. I don't know why teams aren't exploiting it, because we saw teams could exploit the hell out of it with Keston Hiura, right? Like we know teams are capable of doing that to him.
Yes.
But nobody has chosen to do that to him yet, and it's baffling. I don't understand it. They make the compelling case all the time. So yeah, I don't know. I've been a Garrett Mitchell skeptic basically this whole time, and he just keeps producing. But I say he keeps producing, but he has 322 career plate or at bats, I should say. He has 322
right,
career plate
barely
appearances.
played.
Yeah, I mean we have half a season of Garrett Mitchell so far, which amusingly, and maybe this is a harbinger of things to come. Remember the first half season of Keston Hiura? Like, that was really awesome. That's
a good call.
He was amazingly good in his first half season. So we've got about a half season of Garrett Mitchell. So we'll see where it goes from here. But I hate to be Debbie Downer on this one, but I just it just doesn't make sense. The Garrett Mitchell thing just does not make sense to me.
JVT, another question asking if a trade market for Christian Yelich ever developed, even if the return was somewhat underwhelming, should the Brewers consider doing it? What are the pros and cons of this type of decision? So I guess pro, Paul, you'd get out from underneath the long-term contract, free up some immediate payroll, but what about the cons?
I think the only real con there, and not insignificant, is the sort of star power that Yelich brings to the team, because he's got the awards. He was one of their best players ever for 2 years. And the Brewers have a lot of low-key, like, star power is not the right word even, but recognizable guys. Yelich is their only, like, big national guy. I'm just not sure they care about that. And as time goes on, Yelich's star shines less and less as he misses more time, as he starts to disappoint more. So that's really it. Like, if you can get a decent return for Yelich at this point going forward, you should probably do it. There'll always be diehards that like having him on the team, but I think that ship, like, he's never going to be as good as he was. It's not going to happen. Backs don't heal, and first of all, this isn't going to happen because backs don't heal. Anything you trade Yelich for will be a bag of baseballs at this point, and so, to some extent, you might as well get your good month out of him until he can't play anymore. But yeah, you should move on from him because it's just PR. And I feel like the PR is at this point at a level where it's not that big a deal. Like people realize he's not what he used to be. And so it's okay to move on at this point.
Yeah, if somebody is willing to take that contract off of you, you don't need anything back. It literally would just be, somebody's 50th best prospect or something. But nobody's going to be willing to do that because that's, especially in the tightened market that we're going to see emerge here, because this is going to be a much tighter market than I think anybody. I was listening to the Effectively Wild. They were doing their prediction, their drafting of the MLB trade rumors prediction thing, and they were taking mostly unders, but they took some overs, and I was like, no, this market is going to be really, really, really tight. It's going to be really bad. People don't realize how much of a buyer's market this is going to be because there are going to be so many teams that aren't buying. There's going to be so many teams that are just sitting and waiting and seeing what happens with the RSN deals, with the economy as a whole. Like, there's going to be a lot of people sitting and waiting this out and trying to understand what is going to happen right now. Everybody's going to act very cautiously. So, yeah. And they wouldn't get that. They wouldn't get that from him. On the other hand, I would say that I think you potentially can still get something from Christian Yelich. We were kind of talking about that a little bit earlier. And I think before we started, right? Like, I think you can potentially get some production out of Christian Yelich. It's just always going to be, well, is he going to break down? When is the next time he's heading on the IL with back issues going to be? So he's a smart hitter. He knows the strike zone really, really well. And so the thing that we really want to see in spring training for Christian Yelich, I'll wrap this up, is you want to see how hard he's impacting the baseball, because he's always been a guy who hits the baseball hard, oftentimes too much on the ground. But what we really want to see in spring training is what is the exit velocity? What are the exit velocities looking like for Christian Yelich? That's the number one question everybody should be paying attention to right now.
Yep. And easy to forget, because I certainly did, the mega extension that he signed before 2020 included a full no trade clause. And he's got 10-5 rights anyway. So any trade would need to be signed off by him as well. So just keep that in mind in case the exit velos this spring are impossibly low.
So what you're saying is there's no way he's getting traded to the Angels.
No. All right. Last couple of questions this week. Brian Polakowski asking, which of the pre-ARB guys would you most want to lock up with a Freddie-like deal? This is interesting because obviously Churio's already taken care of. So what's next on the list, Paul?
I think mine would probably be Ortiz.
Yeah.
Who is still pre-ARB and I think is like a good offensive Freddie comp. I think like Freddie, Ortiz is likely to be a good but probably not great player. He started off like gangbusters. Remember we talked about him as like a high WAR, maybe MVP candidate early in the season. And I think what we saw over the course of the season is kind of what Ortiz is. And he has a good high defensive floor. He can play a lot of positions, and his bat is good. Even if it's never going to be great, it's very good. So I think there's probably, he's 26, I think. There's maybe 27. I think he's still 26 though. So there's still probably a tiny bit of upside in there, but he probably is kind of what he is at this point. But he'll probably be a good to very good offensive piece for the next 5 to 6 years, and you may as well lock that up for a reliable amount of money and get out of the arbitration game with him if you can. I think that'd be a perfectly fine one to do.
Ortiz is the clear answer here.
Right.
I think if you really, if you're a Sal Frelick believer, if you're inclined in that direction, Frelick could be an option, but I think
if you're one of the 1%ers,
but it's the answer here is Joey Ortiz. The answer is Joey Ortiz, I think, with a bullet.
Absolutely. All right. Last question, and this is an interesting one, and I'll do my best because this is not a visual medium, and we're talking about a graph through an audio format. So PJ Wessels asking, this is a fascinating post about pitcher development for pitchers joining new teams, specifically looking at the Stuff Pro metric. The Brewers and the Rays are a tier above everyone else, with the Brewers having a much tighter range of improvement than the Rays. How essential was it to keep Chris Hook for this, or is this an organizational thing? And so PJ is asking about a Bluesky post that Steve Brown, who does a lot of analytic stuff on Stuff Pro and keep maps and that kind of stuff, put out there. And sure enough, at the very, very top, the Brewers, in terms of, improving or, at least getting the most out of the pitchers they acquire. And I think we can point to any number of acquisitions, right? Even going down to Frankie Montas and some of the folks they got as recently as this year. The Rays are second in terms of improving pitchers. Other ones at the top include the Twins, the Yankees, and the Jays. Interestingly, the Rockies are up there, but there are huge error bars on that. So, take that for what it will be, Coors effect or whatever. At the bottom, there's the Royals. The Dodgers are second to last in the league in improvements, which, I think kind of confirms my priors in the sense that they're always looking to trade for pitching, and then it never seems to go quite as well as they hope. The Mets are also third from the bottom, Cleveland as well. So, I guess, yeah, Ryan, what does this tell you about Chris Hook and the Brewers overall?
Well, the interesting thing here is that this is about in-season trades. This is what they're asking here. And so that means how quickly you're able to do it, how much you're able to just like hit the ground running with guys. And I guess I'm a little surprised. I would have thought, because we've talked about a lot on this podcast before about how we feel better about when they bring guys in over the winter and have time to work on them in spring training, get them into the lab in the winter when, the bullets aren't flying out on the field, and they have some time to actually tweak some things and do that. So I was surprised to see that they are actually towards the top of the heap in mid-season, but I guess it makes sense that that's a harder transition for anybody to make. It's going to be harder to improve anybody at that time of year. And so the fact that they're better than their competitors at that, I would love to see how this compares to how they do with guys who they acquire in the offseason. That would be one thing that would be really interesting to me. But yeah, I think this confirms a lot of what we already knew, which was that the Brewers are elite at getting the most out of pitchers, that they're really, really good at that it's a core competency that they have. And it's a big part of why they've been able to have consistent success well in excess of what anybody sort of expects from them on a year-to-year basis, is because they know their stuff when it comes to improving pitchers.
I also want to point out, since per the question, this is, I do think, one of the Chris Hook stats from an overall development perspective on pitchers, not in season. That's a lab stat, and I don't think Chris Hook individually is that important for that. That is organizational. That's building the lab, understanding their analytics. But where coaches, where guys who talk to players become important, is in selling people and getting buy-in on implementing change, on executing change. And so when you get guys in, you can tell a pitcher all day, like, hey, if you start throwing this, you'll start to become effective. But a lot of times those kinds of things do have a cost. Sometimes they're harder on your arm. It's hard to, you can't just go out there and change your grip and have it feel the same and locate the same. And when they bring guys in, getting buy-in and work from guys to actually change their approach is difficult. And this is probably a Hook stat and where he maybe makes the most difference in the organization.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, you see it time and time again with the Brewers. They trade for a guy and immediately, like, they just go and tinker with the repertoire, right? Like Frankie Montas wasn't, I think his splitter, he wasn't throwing it very much with the Reds or one of his pitches. I think Savali too. There was a pitch mix situation where, they go in, they identify the worst pitch, and sometimes it's as simple as stop throwing your garbage pitch.
Yeah.
But that is a coaching trait, to your point. So
yeah, and convincing someone that something they do is bad is very difficult.
Yeah.
You can show even stats will be ignored by people who want to ignore something for something they're comfortable with or they feel is good. Like, I'll bet it's difficult to convince Frankie Montas that his fastball isn't like the best fastball in baseball. I'll bet that's a hard sell. Like, I can see anybody who throws like 98 to 100 being like, no, my fastball is great. I throw 98 to 100. But, these are not always the easiest things to convince people of, and the Brewers are very good at doing that, which is soft skills and hard skills together are like the best thing you could do in sports. And the Brewers have been good at both of those things for quite a while. Less so lately with some locker room stuff, but they're good at this kind of thing.
Absolutely. That'll do it for questions this week. We're done. So thanks again, everybody, over on Patreon, patreon.com/MKE tailgate. If you're not a patron already, $2 a month, you can ask whatever question you want to ask of us every week, and we'll answer that. That goes for the reporting as eligible Packers pod as well. We do have a new patron to shout out this week, Ryan. Who do we have joining the ranks?
Just double checking to make sure I didn't miss anybody else, but doesn't look like it. I did. Nicholas Cormier is a new member at the Ball and Glove level, and we thank you very much for that. Hopefully you enjoy the content.
Yeah, welcome aboard.
Absolutely. Even if you're not a patron, a reminder, go support us another way. You can go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you're listening to this right now. Give us a 5-star review. And while you're there, please give us a follow as well to make sure you never miss an episode through the off season. So that'll do it for this week. We'll see what other news comes out in the next week or so, especially, with free agency kicking into full swing here. Join us over on Bluesky. We all have accounts over there. As we mentioned, Paul has his starter packs. There'll be notes in this episode, notes from Ryan as well on where you can find all of us. But I think I speak for all of us when I say we're starting to spend a little bit more time over there as opposed to the other site, just for our own mental sanity, if nothing else. So come over to Bluesky. It's a fun time. And until then, everyone, take care of yourselves. We will see you next time here on Milwaukee's Tailgate.